Coming up, I join the last remnants of humanity on their hostile new home planet in gigantic Wii U RPG, Xenoblade Chronicles X. John settles the long-running rivalry between the two schools of role-playing combat.
Being an RPG, you must now kill it just for the experience of doing so.
Aoife charts the long and confusing history of Final Fantasy VII. And these charismatic NPCs discuss the unique elements that define a Japanese role-playing game.
Misogynistic wardrobe choices for female characters.
We're grinding so you don't have to on this week's Video Game Nation. If you're a regular viewer wondering about the beard, it's simple really. I sat through one of Xenoblade Chronicles X's cutscenes and by the time it was over, boom, there it was. Conversations in this Wii U exclusive RPG are often repetitive, circuitous, exposition-filled affairs. They veer wildly between grim Battlestar Galactica-style musings on the near extinction of humanity and awkward stabs at humour, most involving the game's unwelcome answer to Jar Jar Binks. You'll come away from each one remembering nothing and rueing the fact you've once again been pulled away from its enchanting world. So let me do in 30 seconds what the game takes approximately 5 hours to explain. In the surprisingly near future, Earth is caught in the middle of a battle between two warring alien races and subsequently obliterated. Humanity attempts to escape in giant space arcs, but only a few avoid being destroyed. One surviving ark, the White Whale, is shot down en route to a habitable planet called Mirror, forcing a crash landing and scattering many of its cryogenically frozen passengers across the land. You are one such passenger, and upon being awoken, are soon inducted into a task force called Blade. Blade's primary mission is to find the other human icicles and learn more about the planet in the process. Now, unlike X's predecessor Xenoblade Chronicles, your character is an entirely custom creation. There's not a huge amount of choice, but it's still refreshing to be given the option to not play as a doe-eyed hairspray addict for once. Unless that's your thing, obviously.
I think character creators are fun. I think you got to be in the right place in your life for them, ideally unemployed. Like, I've spent so much time between the ages of about, I want to say 15 and 17, working on, like, especially wrestling. Wrestling character creators are the best, usually because they're just the most varied. You have to be able to make just about everything.
By the time you've done that and you get in the game, you've got to do all the tutorial stuff. So I'll have spent 5 hours playing the game, which is all making the character and the tutorial stuff, and then I've got to get a bed. So I don't actually play the game if I've got a character creator. I'll run out of time.
Love character creators. First, you know what it was? First, with character creators, I used to try and make myself, because you don't get to play many black guys in video games, especially as the main role. So I used to just make me and used to feel self-important when, when my character was saving the world yet again. It was like, yeah, that's me.
I used to, when I was younger, I used to like making sort of thinner, more muscly versions of myself. That was always my go-to. You get older and you just accept, one, that's not going to happen, and two, I can't be bothered with fiddling around with sliders for an hour. It's all right, just default. Good for me.
I realise I probably sound fairly negative about the game so far, but really I just wanted to get the bad out of the way first because there's so much good to get through. Xenoblade Chronicles X is a game of overwhelming scale, jaw-dropping beauty, and almost exhausting depth. It's practically impossible to do justice to the complex web of interconnected systems that make it all tick, but rest assured that if you like your RPGs stuffed to the gills with stats, quests, and loot, this is definitely the game for you. While Xenoblade loves lavishing you with inconsequential details about its characters and world, it's surprisingly cagey when it comes to telling all about playing it properly. It's content to share enough for basic survival before shoving you out into its vast, uncharted expanse and leaving you to fend for yourself. Which makes Xenoblade Chronicles X that rarest of things, a game where you actually have to consult the manual. As you're assaulted with all manner of obscure iconography, mystery statistics, and cryptic notifications, you'll find yourself dipping into this in-game Bible to make sense of it all. For example, during combat, you'll happen upon these seemingly random QuickTime events that appear to trigger something or other. Well, it transpires that these are called soul voices, and these are customizable buffs that are triggered by performing certain actions in the heat of battle. And just look at the screen where you choose them. Absolutely bewildering. Not only will you have to memorize how you trigger them, you'll also have to learn what benefits they provide, because it doesn't tell you in the midst of its frantic combat. It's just the tip of the combat iceberg too, and that iceberg is a gargantuan glacier with multiple weapon types and augments, upgradable classes that each come with their own set of individually upgradable arts, that's skills to you and I, and even arms manufacturers that you can develop affinities with by favouring their gear. And just when you think you've got it all sussed, you'll get a license to pilot and customize skells, Xenoblade's wonderful transforming mechs, and a whole new world of battle possibilities open up. This dizzying level of depth is matched by its enormous world, which is reportedly 8 times the size of GTA 5's Los Santos. That's a lot of land to explore and conquer, a task that might be viewed as a little too intimidating by some.
You know, fine, I'll say, size matters, right? Bigger is better, but it's important that, all that size is put to good use.
To really invest in a game and to kind of hit that peak and that point where you sort of enjoy the story and there's enough kind of going on and you're not going to get to 3/4 of the way through and be like, forget it. It has to be a certain size to really deal with it. I don't think it's better value for money. You should just make it smaller but have more things to do. Because you could just make it really big and there's like nothing there. That's no fun.
It's 54 times the size of Skyrim, is that true? Yeah, okay. No, I mean, that one piece of information tells me I'm never going to play that game. I am way too old to spend as long as it would take to wander around that many rendered fields.
In Skyrim, I used to try and walk from one end to the other. That'd be a thing I'd do because I'm a fun and exciting guy who would probably enjoy a walking simulator. That would take hours and hours and hours. That's ages. And I don't know whether I'm excited about that or not. Now I'm saying it to myself, a part of me is a bit excited.
Mirror is an awe-inspiring environment rich with biodiversity and areas of outstanding natural beauty. There's a real sense that you're a stranger in a strange land, one where humans must once again battle their way back to the top of the food chain. Contributing to this sense of a living, breathing world is the behaviour of its alien fauna. Unlike most RPGs, there's plenty of placid creatures living alongside the aggressive beasts, and it's entirely up to you to figure out which is which. There's no clear delineation between low-level and high-level animals either, so once again, it's your role to figure out the safest routes to take based on your current powers. Xenoblade Chronicles X is not a game for the faint of heart. It's willfully obtuse, brutally difficult at times, and takes great pleasure in filling your screens with more stats and gauges than you'll know what to do with. However, it's also a remarkable achievement, the kind of game where you can't fathom how its makers managed to achieve quite so much, quite so well, and all without the glitches and bugs that plague other games of similar scope, and on the Wii U of all consoles. It's not quite perfect, but it's definitely. Now I hand you over to fellow cynic John Robertson as he bravely attempts to answer the question that's divided RPG fans since time immemorial. Real-time or turn-based?
Hello, television friends. High def, high five. Now, I want to talk to you about turn-based versus real-time combat, but since we're doing RPGs, first we're going to go on a meaningless side quest. Now, you're walking down a forest path when suddenly you encounter a monster, and this being an RPG, you must now kill it just for the experience of doing so.
And once that's done, don't forget to loot its corpse. Just because you're an elf doesn't mean you can't commit a war crime. You see, RPG logic works like the mind of any common psychopath. You kill people and steal their things because you're the hero. And even if you end up being a mass murderer, you still get to be the main character.
If an RPG was really going to punish you for bad behaviour, it would put you in jail and then a better character would come along and complete the game.
But instead, for everything you do, most RPGs will give you a reward, and it's the delirious sensation of watching numbers become other, bigger numbers. My animal just won a deathmatch against another animal. Look at it, level up. Be still my beating heart. My Pokemon has more maths than it used to.
It's common now, but for decades, RPGs were the only genre that made a real show of getting you to repeat stuff just so you'd get better at it.
Because an RPG is capitalism in furry boots. You work, you steal, you accumulate possessions. The more of everything you have, the happier you are, and anyone who gets in your way can and must be destroyed.
You're meant to be a fantasy hero, but really, you're just Donald Trump. And I don't want to picture him naked and oiled up, you know, with a loincloth and a broadsword, but you just did, and now my day is that much better.
So to the question of turn-based versus real-time combat, well, historically, JRPGs have favoured turn-based battles where, upon encountering an enemy, you descend into a thrilling world of lists and statistics, where you pick your actions and then let loose.
You're literally ordering paint off a menu. It's like going to Subway.
Whereas by and large, Western role-playing games have a lust for real-time combat, adding the thrill of manual dexterity to the laying of the smackdown.
Put it simply, turn-based is the school nerd getting back at the bully. Real-time is you're the bully.
The longer you play an RPG, especially a modern one, the more you'll find the combat system is just a delivery mode for all the spells, swords, goodies and mayhem you've picked up over the game. You're a pizza boy, and the only topping is death.
The only difference is how you get your sword out of your sheath and into your enemy's face. Real-time either lets you pick off a menu,
Or simplifies how you draw your weapon, like The Witcher 3 when you want to take out your silver or steel sword, which is kind of like going to a fancy dinner and trying not to embarrass yourself by using the wrong spoon. While turn-based says the world will stop for you while you pick any of these things, and when you do, you'll be rewarded with an animation and some more numbers.
Both systems start as a way of hooking you into the game and then progress until you're literally just taking everything you had in your toy box and throwing it at an enemy who can't fight back. My God, it's the American dream.
We'll be right back after the break with more VGN, including these actual words. Why didn't you pick cat videos? So obvious.
That's what you got to do in JRPGs. You got to grind like it's a day job.
Harvey's End Tuesday.
Welcome back. Now, isn't it funny that most game genres, your shooters, your fighters, your bear hunting simulators and what have you, are the same no matter their country of origin, and yet we feel the need to create a divide between normal or Western RPGs and Japanese RPGs. What is it about this genre that demands such a distinction? As ever, here's our panel of expert opinion spouters with the answer.
I mean, the best JRPGs are some of the best games ever made. And I think that's because they combine a very linear, very epic story, usually a science fiction or a fantasy story, with the sort of like intelligent gameplay that you would get from something like chess. You know, so it's as if you were reading like some epic manga, but then getting to do a bit of strategy in between every chapter. And I think that while they have gotten a bit repetitive, that basic premise for a video game is a really good one.
Well, JRPGs come from Japan, and that sounds like a very obvious statement, but to look at them in their uniqueness, it's sort of like this is one of the most unique consumer cultures in the world. Like you compare it to a lot of sort of homogenized cultures that are influenced by America, and we've all got our own little quirks, but Japan is very different in comparison to here, and that is reflected in their games.
I think the sort of characteristics of JRPGs are obviously they have a certain visual style and they have sort of game mechanics that, you know, we all reckon are often quite turn-based, but mainly it's just that they're bloody long, aren't they? They just go on and on and on.
Oh, I think JRPGs stand out because they're not afraid to embrace the ridiculous and the fantasy around everything. I love it. I mean, get Final Fantasy VIII. I mean, you start off on a flying school, but at the same time, it's all very character-driven stories, and so even though there's this outlandish different things going on and all these mythical beasts around, the stories are always rooted in the characters, and you can understand the choices that they make because you kind of empathize with them.
The two main things I associate with JRPGs are probably misogynistic wardrobe choices for female characters and little animals with massive eyes.
Oh, Nickers! Where did he spring from?
My favourite JRPG is a game called Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door on the GameCube. It's the sequel to the original Paper Mario. First of all, this game is absolutely gorgeous. The whole thing is like handcrafted-y, paper looking, but it's also absolutely hilarious. It is by far one of the funniest games I've ever played, and for a game so packed with dialogue as JRPGs tend to be, to have that dialogue be so sharply written, I think that to me just elevated it above everything else.
Can't go wrong with Secret Matter. That was the first kind of JRPG I played when I was like 12 or something like that. It's an amazing game. It was the first game where I learned how to grind. I got to a point where I was at a boss and I just couldn't beat the boss because I was just too low a level. And then I backtracked, started finding lots of different treasures, started like leveling up and stuff, came back to the boss and I could beat the boss, and I finally realized that's what you got to do in JRPGs. You got to grind like it's a day job.
My favourite JRPG, and I'm not making this up, this is not a dream I had, it's called Kanye Quest 3030, and it is about Kanye West, who gets sucked into a wormhole and he goes to the year 3030 and he has to fight all these clones of like rappers like Snoop Dogg and stuff with croissants. Now that's brilliant.
Final Fantasy IX has to be my favourite JRPG. It's just really lovely. Like, it's got quite a serious story in JRPG terms, but it's like a hug in a jewel case.
I want to say Paper Mario on the N64, but I don't know if that really counts. Even though that is Japanese and it is an RPG, I know there's forums full of people arguing why that isn't a JRPG. Although I don't care what any of those people think, so I'm going to say Paper Mario on the N64.
For JRPGs, I think the way it needs to evolve is they kind of need to bring in, I guess, a more realistic tone into some of their games now. Because we've seen a lot of fantasy stuff and stuff like that, but I haven't really seen too many JRPGs rooted in kind of just everyday normal life. I mean, Persona series, they kind of did it, but there's still kind of magical elements to that game as well. I want to see one that's like a dead-end game where it's just you're a normal person doing normal things, and then a story envelops around that.
I think the JRPG genre is evolving. Even the Final Fantasy series is evolving. Like, you look at Final Fantasy 15, that's constantly been changing. Like, even from 13, that was very different. People might not like it, but it was very different. And now 15 is very different as well. They're constantly evolving what they're doing, and it's kind of becoming a new golden age of Japanese role-playing games, the amount that are coming out and the quality of them at the moment.
JRPGs are something which, have their pillars, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and these pillars, they're quite afraid of change. There's all these cliches about JRPGs, and that's because all the big ones refuse to change. And I feel like they're just made now for this really insular, really niche audience. You either are a fan of that kind of thing with the big hair and, or you're not. And I'd love to see somebody make a really accessible, but also high budget and just AAA feeling JRPG again.
Ideally, I'd like an 8-minute JRPG where with all the elements, like, so you get to fight a big dragon, someone dies, everyone has a little cry, and then like there's a nice ending with confetti, but all in 8 minutes. That'd be perfect.
I do not want the genre to evolve because my favourite one ever is Paper Mario on the N64, so I would like them all to be like Paper Mario on the N64.
Women in clothes? Shocking, right? Practical clothing for women. It'll never happen.
I've just completed Final Fantasy VII again. But here's the question, why did I buy and play a 19-year-old game on PS4 when I already own the original discs on PlayStation 1 and digital copies on PC and iOS? A lot of reasons, really. Partly because of the new trophies up for grabs on PS4. A little bit because there's a remake and I wanted to refresh the rest of the game's systems and story. And partly because of the cheats on PS4 that allow you to turn off random encounters, make your party invincible, and best of all, speed up time to make your progress 3 times as fast. And those do totally change the way you play the game, but mostly it's just because I love it. I've completed it more times than I can possibly count, and yet I'll always happily take the excuse to play it again just one more time. It's hard to explain what makes Final Fantasy VII so special to someone who's never played it before. It's hard to think back to the first time I played it and remember at which point exactly I became hooked. It might have been Avalanche's first attack on a Midgar reactor. It might have been when Cloud and the gang make their escape from Shinra HQ and down the highway on a motorbike and what looks like an old Ford F100. Maybe it was the moment when the world map first opened up and you realised just how big this game was for the 90s, and it just blew your mind. All I know is I'd never been so amazed by a story like that before, and I used to fake being sick so I could stay home from school and play it as a result, which is something that you should never do, alright? Sure, it might be to do with the fact that FF7 was Square's first 3D Final Fantasy game. There was definitely no small amount of awe in seeing all those 3D models and animations, which look so crude now, doing their thing. And the music stays with you long after you stop playing. I'll always be able to hum a few bars from the Cosmo Canyon theme or Eris's theme at the drop of a hat. Humming them without shedding a tear or two is another story entirely though. For me though, the magic lay in the characters and in the story, and how vast and well thought out the world felt to exist in. I've completed it more times than I care to count, but in the most recent playthrough, I still found new items and new snatches of dialogue that I'd never experienced before. I defeated Ruby and Emerald Weapon, two of the game's most difficult optional bosses, for the very first time. But there's no way I'd ever do that if I didn't care so much about the story of Cloud and Sephiroth and Avalanche and Meteor and Genova. It'd be almost impossible for me to sit here and explain to you what this story is all about in a way that doesn't make it sound completely awful and convoluted. Arguably, it's not even the best Final Fantasy story. A lot of people will tell you that 7 is overrated and that 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 and even 10 are infinitely more worthy of your attention. And maybe they're right. But 7 will always be my favourite, and I'll probably always play whatever new iteration of it that comes out, even when the spin-offs are not particularly good. Crisis Core on PSP, it was alright, if a little bit rambling. Dirge of Cerberus on PS2, good on paper but a disaster in practice. Advent Children, a sequel film set 2 years after the events of the game, looked incredible and was packed full of cool fan service, but ultimately didn't make a whole lot of sense. All of this should tell me to stay far, far away from the remake when it happens, but the fact is, no matter how bad the remake does or doesn't turn out to be, it can't take away from the hours upon hours I've already invested and enjoyed with this universe. Everyone has that game that means a lot to them, not just because of what they actually played, but because it reminds them of a certain time in their life. It can't change the fact that I sat up late at night grinding chocobo racing when I had really quite important school exams the next day. Again, you should absolutely never do that, okay? And it won't take away the feelings I had when I discovered the true fate of Red 13's father, or the fun of making my way through Wall Market, or the countless mini-games Final Fantasy VII offers in addition to the main game and battle system. This is the reason it actually makes me a little bit sad that the spelling mistakes and other little human errors have been corrected in the PS4 re-release. They were as much a part of my experience with the game as anything else. But though they've been corrected, my memory of them as they once were still remains. It's kind of fitting for a game that focuses so much on memory, actually. The remake might be good, it might be terrible, but my memories of Final Fantasy VII are untouchable.
And here we are, 30 minutes of our lives gone and none the wiser for it. Just like a cutscene from Xenoblade Chronicles X, in fact. If you'd like to chat to like-minded gamers or just harass the hosts, do so on the official Video Game Nation Facebook page, on Twitter with the hashtag VGN, or simply use the raw power of interpretive dance. See you next week.
I've been asked many